So let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome all of you to our Traverse PC September webinar. Today we're going to be taking a look at what's new in TPC Desktop 2019 R1. And I just want to go over kind of a few introductory things here before we jump in on the webinar. I'm going to mostly follow this outline. I will deviate from it sometimes from time to time, but I'll try to stick with this as much as possible. So I'll come back to the outline each time when we start geoids or surfaces and just kind of remind you where we're at and where we're going next. And then this is a What's New webinar. And these What's New webinars are different than, a lot of times we come in and we take a look just at legal descriptions or calibrations and we focus on that one topic. So we kind of start at the beginning and we take you as far as we can in the hour that we have. So it's kind of concentrated, it's focused. This one I'm really going to be jumping all over the place. And it's great if you already use Traverse PC and you know all about surfaces, and I jump in and I talk about bringing out elevations up to a surface. But what if you're new to Traverse PC? Well, just kind of make a note that, okay, this is where he accessed surfaces, and you'll have to go back and maybe read up on it a little bit or look at some of the initial videos maybe before some of this makes sense. I don't know how many people are watching today who are new to Traverse PC, but I understand it could be just a little difficult to sometimes kind of fit the pieces together. I will, from time to time, because it's a What's New video, be referencing the web pages. I just want to show you what those are real quick. We call it a web product page. So each release has a page that talks about kind of what's in it. And we'd like to give you little short videos so you can kind of see, oh, this is what we did with calibrations. And then we kind of just outline some of the other changes that we made. Sometimes we'll have additional videos for these. So you can see there's actually quite a bit here. And I'll cover some of this, but I'll tell you I won't cover all of it. Okay? And so I can go to the GIS stuff and say, okay, this is what's new there. Or in surfaces, this is what's new. Great reference for you. If you want to just come back and say, okay, should I take a look at this? Should I get the update? Or if you're on the connection, you get the update. Do I want to get it downloaded and start using it right away because of something that I need in there? And then I also will be bringing up, under the Discover menu, there's a What's New. And I like to point people this direction because it's a real quick synopsis. So we list the years by tabs. And then I can walk down and say, oh, this is what was in 2019. It came out in April. And then this is the release we're on, 2019 R1. And you're going to see it's going to line up pretty well with our outline today. We just kind of give you some synopses, quick highlights of what's in here. So just kind of a nice little reference. And I want you to know that that's there for you. Then I want to talk about CEU credits. So if we drop down to the bottom of the registration, there's some information here about whether or not you'd like to receive continuing education units for this webinar. If you do, after the webinar, I should say during the webinar, I'll be presenting a 3-character code, 1 character at a time. When I do, I'll bring that character up. Go ahead and write that down somewhere. I'll give you a few minutes to do that. And at the end of the seminar then, you'll receive an email that says, if you'd like credits, click this link. You'll go in and fill out some information, including that code. And we need to have that sent in within 1 hour of the end of the presentation. 1 hour after the end of the presentation, we can't accept those anymore. So it's just kind of some rules we have for your states to honor this and give you credit for the webinar. And then those of you that turn in that form with the correct code, we'll try to get those certificates out to you tomorrow or maybe as late as Friday, depending on how busy we are. And then finally, I'm going to try to get through this stuff pretty quick, and I'll limit the webinar just 1 hour. If we have some time at the end, I'll unmute you and open it up for questions, and happy to answer as many questions I can within that hour time frame. I do ask you to stick with questions related to these topics because that's what people are interested in who are attending the webinar. If you have any other questions, just go out to our user forum and ask those there, and we'll respond to you as quickly as we can. Okay, so with that, let's jump in on what's new in TPC Desktop 2019 Release 1. Taking a look at the Geodetic or Geoids edition in TPC Desktop 2019. If you come to the 2019 page, you're going to see the standard geoid height, where we compute the geoid undulation at any latitude and longitude, and that allows us then to compute a mean sea level or geographic elevation from an ellipsoid height, or vice versa, an ellipsoid height from a ground elevation. So Traverse PC does this by supporting geoid models, and let's go ahead and just kind of take a look at how that works inside of Traverse PC. I brought up a Learn Geodetic sample survey because I wanted one that stretched 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 miles. So we're actually going to get some differences in the geoid undulation by going a pretty far distance like this. Normally, and this is what Traverse PC has done forever, normally in a small area survey, we can just translate up or down so that our ellipse heights match our geographic elevation. And so Traverse PC historically, or in past versions, has just assumed they're the same. So my height that I'm showing here, my ellipsoid height, is the same as my elevation. And when I bring my GPS or GNSS data, I go in and I translate it so that one of those points ends up at a specific elevation. Whether that's a benchmark or an assumed elevation doesn't really matter. All the elevations get translated to their geographic elevation or mean sea level elevation. And then same when I go back out, I can just set them to my ellipse height and then export that data. So I did have to do that manually, but it was pretty easy to do, particularly for a small survey where I'm just choosing one ellipsoid or geoid undulation to apply to all the heights or elevations. This opens up a new sort of arena for us in TPC Desktop 2019 Release 1, where we can actually go into the coordinate reference system. So here's our coordinate reference system here, and we can choose a geoid. And I'm just going to hit the Browse Default folder so we can see which ones are here. These are PGM files, and again, I said these are the NGA or the military versions of these. And I can go ahead and pick. Some of these are pretty large, some of these are fairly small, but I can just go ahead and pick the one that I want. And if I don't have them installed yet, I can just hit install. Let's watch what happens when that comes up. So Traverse PC opens up the geoid page, and I can download the ones that we've already got programmed in the EGM, or the like the NGS ones are coming soon. So we'll have these in the download page real soon. And you just download and install, and they'll show up in that folder for you. So look for that out on that web page. And then I can cache this over the survey extents. Maybe we'll come back and talk about that again here just real quick. But let's go ahead and OK this. And let's come over now and take a look at our heights and elevations again. So now I've got that geoid undulation computed for each one of these points. And I can see it's about 55 feet. Okay? And I'm not too concerned about whether it's plus or minus. Traverse PC takes care of that for me. So I know it looks like the mean sea level is above the ellipsoid here. But what's interesting to me is that as I come down here, remember these were all 1,500 feet here in height. Maybe I've got one here where I've got a couple where I've got a different elevation. But look, I've got 5.13, 4.85, 4.97, 4.89. So most of it's about 4.8 something, but I've got some of these that are 5 point something. Okay, so a little bit different undulations there, and that's really what we're tracking with this. So Traverse PC is going to each latitude and longitude that we say, hey, I've got an ellipse height, I want a elevation, or I've got an elevation, I want an ellipse height. So on these points, most of these, Traverse PC is holding the geodetic ellipse height and computing the elevation. We can determine that just by identifying which ones are geodetic points, and it's easy to do with the settings in the view there. and then I can have Traverse PC compute those back and forth. So that's all there is to it, really. I just select my geoid, and Traverse PC takes care of computing an elevation for any geodetic point or an ellipse height for any coordinate point. I want to come back here just real quickly and visit this again, though, so you can kind of see. So I can have these files in the default folder, and that's this program data folder, Traverse PC, and the version. And we've created a new folder called Geoids for that. So I can put any additional Geoid files in there, or I can browse to a different location. So some of you are going to have this on a shared file server, for instance, or another place on your computer. And so you can select it from there. And then, of course, you saw how we install that just by going to Traverse PC's website. And we supply the most common ones there for you. So if you don't find it on our website, go ahead and dig up your own and just copy it into these folders. And then whichever one you select will give you some basic information. A lot of these are based on WGS84, and we'll give you the URL so you can go find more information about that, who developed that geoid model, and what information do they have. A lot of these also then will have a calculator. And I know some of you will want to come in and just kind of see how they do with that. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up one of these geoid calculators here. So here's the online calculator for the one I just selected. So this is the NGA EGM96 geoid calculator, and I can go ahead and put in whatever I've got for latitude and longitude, and then I can select whether I'm working in feet or meters, run it, and I'll get the mean sea level or geographic elevation printed out, along with the ellipse height and along with the geoid undulation. So use that to check what Traverse PC does if you want. If you add your own geoid, look for their URL where you can actually go in and find their calculator. And we do that on this install page that I showed you earlier. We go ahead and list the URLs for those. So you can actually head out to their website and get information on it and check for their calculator. We'll put live links on this. You can just click it and go right there. Because we want you to kind of confirm that, yeah, I'm using the right geoid model that I want. A lot of you are simply going to match the geoid model you use in Traverse PC with whatever geoid model you used in your data collector or on your GPS or GNSS collector. So come in and take a look at that. I'm going to just make sure we've got geoids here in the help. And I think you're going to find them under elevations. So if we take a look at elevations, we're going to find information on geoids here. I think we're going to find it under coordinate transformations. Okay, so here's geoids also. So we listed a couple of different places so you can find it. And then we just walk through just some real quick information on selecting a geoid. We set it to none if we don't want Traverse PC to do any geoid calculations. And then we give you just a little information on how it's actually computing back and forth between the two. And again, these are just standard equations you'll find in pretty much any surveying textbook. Okay, so the last thing I want to do on geoids is run you out real quick to the NGS Geoid page and just talk about this a little bit. Right now we're working on adding Geoid 12B, and we'll have that out either when the 2019 R1 is released, when we're done with the beta, or shortly thereafter. So the Geoid 12B will allow you to select the 12A, 12, any of the previous geoids in here. And if it's a new enough like the 12B, it actually includes some of this gravimetric information and this vertical deflection. I have to go back and see which of the older models include that or not, but we supply all these files and the code to actually include those. But I want to just point out that the NGS is moving forward with kind of some experimental stuff. So we're going to find this Geoid 18. So it's one they're working on now that may eventually replace the Geoid 12B. Okay, so they're going to say, do not use this in Alaska, Hawaii, that kind of thing. but it could supersede Geoid 12B here. I recently attended, back in May, the 2019 Geospatial Summit for NGS, where we talked about the blueprint for 2022. And they talked about updating GravD. They talked about an experimental Geoid 19 called X Geoid 19. And I think we're going to see that here, X Geoid Home. If I go to that, you'll find some information about what that is. And then they also talked about this Geoid 18 that I just had on that last page. And really, I'm not sure kind of which direction we're all going to end up going. 2022 is going to be a big shift for us, both for horizontal datums and vertical datums. And we'll just try to keep up with that. So when we bring up that website with the geoids that Traverse PC supports, we'll just keep adding the additional geoids there. We'll try to stick with the ones that we know everyone's using or asks for. I don't know how much we'll get into some of these more experimental ones here, or some of the more gravitational model kind of geoids. There are lots of kind of permutations of those, but we're going to keep it pretty practical, I think. I know some of you that are using geoids now are going to have some questions. I'll see if we've got time at the end, so just hang on to those for now, and we'll wrap up the geoids here then. Okay, let's take a look next at the new tool in 2019 on surfaces. Let me bring that over here for you. One of the things we can do in this version of Traverse PC is that we can move points, or the elevation of points, existing survey points, to a surface. And we've expanded the help topics to kind of help you get a handle on this. So there's a short video on it here. Let me just drop you right in and kind of show you how this works. I created a file out of a job I'm currently working on. Some of you have seen me use this in some of the other webinars. I've actually got it staked out. We're waiting for the contractor to get some time to come in and do the excavation for subgrade. Then we'll bring in rock, hopefully before the winter hits here, and start using this parking area. But I want to just show you real quick that I went into the survey job I was working on and opened this drawing, and I said Tools, Export Drawing As, and I said I want to export the entire drawing as a Traverse PC TRV. So I'm going to send out just this drawing out of, and I think I've got like probably 15 or 16 drawings in the actual survey job. And Traverse PC is going to look through and say which points did they use, which traverses did they use in this drawing, which surfaces did they use in this drawing, and it's going to include those in the survey file that it exports. And that's what I've actually imported for you here. So I have a job that has just this one drawing in it. I do think it's got a couple of surfaces. Okay, so I had a finished grade surface and a subgrade surface for the new pavement area. And then I had certain points and certain traverses in here. So that's all that got exported in the process. And then I've come in and added some new traverses as I develop this additional stakeout points here. So I just wanted to show you real quickly how I created this. And then let's go in and talk about this tool. So Traverse PC has a stakeout report, and I actually use this out there on the job. I'm going to just get rid of the stuff where I created the updated the elevations here. And you can see real quick that I staked it out on July 25th. I actually go out once I've got the hubs in the ground and I do my stakeout. I actually go out and take a look at some of the critical areas. In this particular case, I had a pretty good grade drop from one of these light poles in here and a little parking island down to this end, and I needed to fit the corner of this building, the foundation elevation, with a higher spot over here. So I had quite a bit of kind of fuddling, I call it, in here. And I did. I just went in and adjusted those elevations, and that's what you see here. I adjusted some of them 1/2 foot, 6/10, 8/10, till I kind of got what I wanted out of that. And then I actually use my stakeout report from when I stake those out to generate my cut or fill here. So I actually was ready to mark this cut, for instance, this 0.98, but if I adjusted it, then I changed that design grade, and then I came in here and said, okay, this is what I staked, this is what the design grade is, and if I adjusted it, I modified this elevation, and then I modified the cut or fill. Otherwise, I just marked the stake with the staked elevation, the design elevation, and the cut or fill. So all those stakes are still sitting out there ready for the contractor to come out. But I just wanted to show you that stakeout area, and then we're going to add what we're going to do to this report here in just a minute. So I want to show you that I met with the contractor out there, and I had all of these light poles and parking islands marked with elevation. So I pretty much had enough out there for him. But I did ask him, I said, do you need any more points than that? And in this particular case, he said no. I had plenty of grade stakes out there for him to work with. But sometimes a contractor will say, yeah. They'll just say, give me a couple of more points every 25 feet running across here, or every 50 feet running across here, so I know I can put in a good grade. And in this particular case, the paving company, they don't want me to stake out or design anything less than a 2%, because their reputation depends on the water draining, and they can only just get that pavement in there so accurately. So as long as I'm staying over a 2% grade, I'm pretty sure my subgrade contractor can get out his gyro level and put a 2% grade in pretty well and match my grades over here at the project edge. And I'm pretty sure the pavement guys can do that too. So I'm pretty comfortable I'm going to get good drainage because of my 2%. But if a contractor needs it, I'll go in and put in a few more whiskers and make sure he gets the subgrade exactly right, come back and do the same thing for top of rock. So what I did here is that I created a traverse real quickly using some of the Traverse PC Kogo tools. And what I'll do just real quickly for you here is come in and edit the traverse drawing settings. And I'm going to just turn on solid lines for the control points. And let's turn on a dashed line for the side shots. So you can just kind of see what I did here. I think that would be maybe the easiest way for you to get a handle on it. So I picked some points. We're keeping this existing pavement, although when we finally get there, I made the recommendation to just pull that up and repave, but we're going to grade to the existing pavement. So we're kind of locked in. That's one of our constraints. So I said I'm just going to create a traverse that comes down past that over a little bit, and then I use the stationing tool to put my 25-foot points in on that, and I use the right-of-way offset tool to create multiple points out to this side of it. And Traverse BC, I had it give all of those a 0 elevation. Okay, so now I've got this sort of grid of points out there that I would like to move up to this surface. So this surface is my finished grade points. So I've taken my finished grade points for the project, and I used those to create a surface. And that's this sort of magenta contour lines that we're looking at here. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to have Traverse BC take all of these points in this traverse and move them up to the surface. So what I need to kind of get familiar with is surface tools. So I can put the cursor over anything that's drawn by that surface, a contour line, a tin line, whatever, and I can say I want to do some of these surface tools here. And the one that you might have used in the past is called create a transect. So I can say, okay, I want to pick this line here from B to B, and I just drew a line north to south because I wanted to have what it was doing with that profile there. And I just say, okay, I'm going to give it create a transect, a traverse, and I'm going to call it transect BB, give it some point numbers to use here. And Traverse BC is going to go ahead and create that traverse, and all I might want to do is just go ahead and draw that in profile mode. Okay, so now I can see what this transect is doing, and it actually started at the beginning of the line, which is at the south end, and drew up. And you can see we're fitting this grade change up to that existing pavement right about here and following that all the way up to where we drop back to the curb. So this is kind of our constraint here. And I'll just throw on a grid real quick so you can kind of see what we're talking about. I'll do every 10 feet here and every foot for the vertical. And I'm exaggerating this by 10. But now you can see that I just used that transect to create a profile. And I actually turned in a couple of profiles to the city while we were doing the design work, and they approved those so they know what our grading is for our drainage. And then I sent these over to the pavement contractor as well. So everyone's kind of on the same page, and I used the surface tools in that transect to do that. I'm not going to save that, so take us right back. So I have the option also of, instead of selecting a line like that, I could go into surface tools and I could select a traverse. And Traverse PC would create a transect out of that traverse. It would duplicate it, and then every traverse point in that traverse would get moved up to, the elevation of those points get moved up to the surface. And Traverse PC uses kind of a complicated routine that says, hey, I'm using the triangles in the tin, triangulate irregular network, and I'm figuring out exactly using kind of a dot product, remember that from your high school or college algebra, to determine where that point intersects that triangle, and then I'm going to get the elevation of that. But what was hidden here was that there's nothing here that says I can select a traverse to do that also. You had to just kind of know I could do that or go to the help topics and read about it. So we wanted to make it really super simple for us to come in and say, yeah, I want to right-click this point, and I want to be able to either tell Traverse PC to go ahead and move that traverse to an elevation, or go ahead and use that surface tools to do it. So I go to surface tools, move selected point elevations to surface. So right away, Traverse PC says, okay, I'm going to move those. New dialog you're going to see in this version. I'm going to tell it what to move. Well, hopefully out of that, I'm not seeing entire traverse. Okay, so let's do something here then. Let's go ahead and tell Traverse PC that we want to select that traverse. So in the traverse view, we're going to tell it I want to select that under the traverse tools. So now that's the traverse that gets selected. And now when I update the what list, I've got what I want. So I want the entire traverse station FG stakeout. So I just had to tell Traverse PC, you know, what am I after here? I'm after that whole traverse there. Then I can do the same thing with the finished grade. Okay, I can say I want the surface. I mean, I can choose the finished grade or the subgrade, and I'm doing all of my stakeout based on a finished grade. So I'm going to select what I want to move, and the surface I want to move to. And then I just tell Traverse PC I want to compute this thing. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's compute and take a look at our elevations here. So Traverse PC now has, based on these contours, or based on the model of that surface, adjusted the elevations. So I would expect this point right here, which is really close to the 37-foot contour line. And remember, we're right in the ocean here, so I've assumed an elevation here of, I think, 36 feet at one of the project points, and I'm pretty close. I would expect this elevation to be real close to whatever that contour is, and it is in fact 37. And I can go in and check, but these will all just be right on for me. Now some of you are looking at 687 and the first point to the left and saying they're still 0. How come? Well, the issue here is that these points horizontally are just outside the edge of that surface. So for this finished grade, I didn't include points that were farther out because I'm only interested in the finished pavement. So I didn't create additional points out here, so there's no surface for these points to be adjusted to. And I'm okay with that. I don't need to have an elevation at that. Or if I did, I could move that point down into the surface area using a Kogo tool and then repeat this. And I'll talk about the undo redo here in just a moment. Okay, so Traverse PC went in and updated the position of every one of those points. So I can go into the points manager now, and all of these new points that I just created, here they are right here, because they're all these 0 plus, okay, some of the station points anyhow, have got elevations computed now. And I said protect point elevations after the move, so that's why they're in bold here. That's Traverse PC's way of telling me that those are protected elevations. Now, one of the things I'm going to do on this is I'm going to hit the summary button. And just a moment ago, we were in here looking at this closure report, or stakeout report. And now I'm going to see that in the same report view where I did my stakeout stuff, I also have a note here that says on September 16th or whatever day this is, I went ahead and moved the elevations to the surface. So for every point out there, in this case 0 plus 25, here was the elevation 0 plus 0, 0, and it moved it from 0 to 36.62. So I've got a report here about how each elevation was moved to that particular surface. Okay, really important for me to know that it moved this traverse to that surface and that the elevations were protected after the move. Okay, so just wanted to have you see where that is in the report view. And then of course I can undo that, put them right back the way they were, and if I want to, then I can come in and say, well, I did the wrong surface, I meant to do the other surface. Pick the other one, hit compute again, and away I go. So real easy for me to do that undo, redo stuff here. Now I want to just look at my notes here real quick. I think there was one other thing I wanted to show you here. And I'll just hit that recompute again, just so you can kind of see. Okay, now I remembered what I wanted to show you. I selected this grid here, that one of these grid points, and right-clicked, went to Surface Tools, and I said move those points. But I want to show you some other ways to do that. So I could right-click this surface, go to Surface Tools, and say move selected points. And when I do that, Traverse PC would open that dialog, but it would select that surface in the surface list here. So I wouldn't have to come in and select the surface I want if I had multiple surfaces shown. It would populate the dialog with the surface that I right-clicked. I can also open this dialog from any of the views. So I could select some points in the point manager here, and I could right-click and say move elevations to surface. And it would tell me what I'm moving are those 20 selected points. And I would have to pick the surface I want to move them to, or it would just use the last one that I'd selected. And same way when I do the traverses here, if I want to send this traverse only, I just select it, right-click, and then I say, I have to always just kind of find out where they're at here, move elevations to surface. And again, it would say, okay, I want the entire traverse, or I could open the traverse, select particular traverse points, and then this would say, you know, the 10 points selected in the traverse view. So real handy for me to say, these are the points I want to move, not all the points in the survey. And real easy then for me to just say, okay, these points are now at this surface, I'm ready to go stake those out, and the contractor's got the additional points that he wants. Okay, I've spent quite a bit of time here, but I did want you to just kind of see how that works. And then I'm going to just use this as a segue. We also mentioned here that we've added a surface elevations help topic. And I just want to show you real quickly kind of what we're doing with some of the help in here. Not everyone comes in to help, but all the details are here. So what we used to put perhaps in an old manual, that's all in here. We added an elevation section to this. And the reason we did that is that here's a whole topic on surface elevations, and you're going to see this new command here, moving elevations to a surface. But you're also going to see things like, I want to restrict elevations of source points. Okay, I can tell Traverse PC I don't want to include any points above an elevation or below an elevation, or restricting contours. How did I tell Traverse PC I want to draw just the contour for a specific elevation, because that's what's required on my FEMA floodplain map. Okay, so we were trying to, and here's that creating transects that I just did, trying to give you better access to this information. I talked about the geoids earlier, and here's the information on geoids, all under this elevations. And I'm pretty sure if I go down to surfaces, let's find out where that's at, surfaces and contours, we're probably going to have a surface elevations again. Good. And we're going to be able to see some of that stuff. Or I can go right to a topic on move elevations to a surface, and we'll kind of walk you through everything that I just did. You know, selecting points from the different views or managers or a drawing, and then what happens when I move those elevations to a surface, and then how to use that dialog. So we're trying to give you a lot more information in here in the help topics so that you can find out how to do these things, in addition to just making it a lot more obvious, because when I click this and go to Surface Tools, there's a command specifically for this. We try not to give you you know, a million new commands. We try to kind of keep things as simple as possible, but still give you the access you need to make the program useful. There's always kind of a balance there, and we're always trying to be real careful with that. Okay, let me kind of segue here into the Learning Center. In each of the web seminars, we like to make sure that you know how to access information on this topic in what we call our member area, and more specifically in the Learning Center. So let me show you kind of what that looks like. A lot of you are used to coming into our member area, and it's available to you as soon as you log in. And you can come and expand this Learning Center, or just go right to the Learning Center. Either way, it doesn't really matter. And you're going to have access to a whole bunch of topics in addition to learning guides and recorded webinars and user forum, that sort of thing. But I want to show you what we've done to access this from the help topics, and then we're going to jump into the Learning Center a little bit, because we've been working on that through the summer and this fall. So when I get to surface elevations, which was the topic I was just in, I can go to the surfaces page, or the home page for surfaces, and we call that a landing page. So I can come here and learn how to access all kinds of stuff about surfaces. Or I wanted to have you see this. These landing pages now have a link to the Learning Center. So I can click surfaces, and Traverse PC over in my browser is going to open up a page for me, and it's that same surfaces link I would have clicked from the Learning Center when I opened it from the member area. And it takes me right into a page that I only have access to if I'm a Traverse PC customer. I just want to walk you through kind of some changes that we're making here that I think make it a lot more useful to you. Let me just pull up my notes here again real quick. One of the things you're going to notice is there's a new side panel navigation. So all the topics in the Learning Center are now available here. So if I clicked on surfaces and I go, oh, that's not what I wanted. What I really wanted was surveys right next to it. So I can just access surveys here, or I can stay on surfaces or access any. So once I've looked at what I want to look at, I can click another area and say, yeah, and I also wanted to find out how the surfaces show up in the drawings. So I can click on drawings and look at that. We're trying to bring in all of the major subtopics inside of surfaces. So if I take a look down here, here's exclusions. And I can just expand that, and now I've got information on the exclusion. So I can go right back to the help topic for surface exclusions. That's what this would do. It'll open up the help topic for that, and eventually then we'll have, because this is a landing page, we'll have a link back to the Learning Center for that as well. Okay, and that's help that's online, so it's getting updated frequently as we add new things. And then I want you to see that we're bringing in those videos that were out on YouTube and embedding those in here. So here are 2 videos, just a quick kind of short one on surface exclusions, and then a little more in-depth one. This one's already been embedded, and we'll bring this one in from YouTube and embed it here as well. So all the videos can just be watched directly from the Learning Center. It helps you so you're not flipping back and forth to different browsers or different browser tabs. And then of course these all link back to the help topics, and we'll link back to our surface landing page here, or I also have links to the learning guide for this. There's some links back to compare editions. So if I have the premium versions and I want to be able to do some of this transect stuff that I can only do in the Pro version, I can find out what else is available in Pro and maybe make that decision to upgrade or not. And then if we've done any webinars on it. So we have a June 2018 webinar on surfaces. I can look at that webinar, access that, and watch that recorded webinar online. So we're trying to make this Learning Center a lot more accessible and a lot more helpful to you. We're making a pass through it right now as we're getting ready to release 2019 R1, and we'll probably continue that on through October. Should have it wrapped up around the end of October, I think. So look for some neat improvements in here in the Learning Center, and just want to kind of bring that to your attention real quick because you're going to see these links from the landing pages in the help topics. Okay, let's take a look next at some changes to X references, and that'll just kind of tie in with the calibrations as well. So I'll kind of hit this one and then move right into the calibrations. Let me just take a look at the web product page here. And what we say here is we do a better job of reproducing the XREF CAD layers, handling the long XREF layer names, and then XREF blocks. So let's just take a look at those each in order here real quick. So on this particular project, I've got two lighting plans, one for 16-foot lights, and then we did a zone change so we could go with higher lights, narrower sidewalks, quite a few things that would have raised the cost quite a bit. But I wasn't able to submit the 20-foot lighting plan because the city said, you know, that's just not in our code yet. We expect to have the code changed this fall. So I'm actually kind of, I turned in the proposal with the 16-foot lights, got approved, but I don't want to build those because it's more light poles. So really what I want to do is I want to be able to move in the 16-foot plan to the 20-foot plan kind of interchangeably or change them real readily. So I'm going to choose to bring in that lighting information as an XREF. So let's just go ahead and do that real quick. In this particular drawing, I'm going to insert an XREF. I'm going to go over to, I've got kind of a, these are the two plans here, and I kind of stripped out the tables and stuff, so we just have the light fixtures themselves. And this is why I said we're going to tie it in a little bit with the calibration as well. So I've already created a calibration to calibrate their CAD files with the lighting in them with my survey. And the reason there's the discrepancy is that I'm on state plane with this job, and I send over the state plane design elements, like for the outline of the parking and where the parking islands are and where I want the lights, and they don't know what to do with that. So the first thing they do is they translate it down to 0, 0. So now the lighting plan I get back from them doesn't match up with my survey. And that's just not uncommon. I mean, every time I get a set of plans in CAD, the first thing I do is say, you know, what grid is it on? Is it on the survey boundary that I submitted initially, or are they on their own? And I really don't care anymore because I just calibrate that incoming drawing, and it lines it up exactly with my survey. So I did that. I brought in the parking perimeter that was in the lighting design because I had sent it to them, and I just calibrated it to my original parking perimeter, and now everything's on perfectly, and I'm going to say, yeah, I want to use that calibration when I bring in the lights. So now everything kind of comes in exactly where I expect it to. I'm just going to drag this over here a little bit and zoom in. So I've got just what I expect from them. I've got these double light fixtures in the parking islands, and I designed these islands to meet an interior island requirement, but I designed them to hold the lights as well. So now we can actually put the lights behind the fencing around these interior islands, and I'm not worried about people running into them. Okay, and then I've got these 16-foot lights around the edge, and eventually I'll probably replace that with fewer at 20 feet. Okay, so what I want to do here real quick then is take a look at what happens now when we bring in an XREF and how we just handle it a little bit easier, a little bit better than what we used to do. So one of the things that we do differently now is that when I go into the layers, I can tell Traverse PC I want to display the XREF layers. And XREFs end up being pretty long names because in CAD they have the whole file name, then they have a character like a pipe character or a colon, depending on whether or not that XREF is bound or unbound. Okay, and then they have the layer name and the original drawing. So those got pretty long. What we do instead now is that we take the file name and truncate it so that we know we can display the full layer name. It used to kind of just wrap it all the way through all this, the rest of this dialog here. Now it handles it really, really nicely, so I know what layer I'm working with. If I were to bring up any one of these light fixtures, like that XREF there, and I think I have to hold down like the control key, yeah, to get an individual block in it. So I'm going to go ahead and tell Traverse PC with the control key that that's the one I want. Double click, and I can see that here's the full layer name. Okay, so it's got this whole AGI project name, okay, till we get to the end of the file name, and then we have the layer name, which is Project 1 Luminaire A2. Okay, so it's just how they've happened to set it up, but I've truncated this now in the layer dialog so we can actually see everything. I guess that's the name, and here's the layer name down here. Point you in the right direction here. So we truncated the layer names so they're easier to work with. That's really important. And then I want to bring up the drawing data and talk about another thing here, and that's with the blocks. When we first introduced XREFs, Traverse PC was listing all the XREF blocks in this block section here, which means it was storing those blocks internally and unfortunately writing those out to the survey file, the TRV file. We got to looking at that and saying that's really unnecessary because the XREF is in charge of managing all of this inside the drawing. And if that XREF changes, if that file gets updated, which is the whole reason we use XREFs in the first place, then I want it to be able to update those blocks as well. So we've taken those blocks out of the drawing, out of the TRV file, and we have the XREF manage them completely. So they're simply just not going to show up here inside of this. And I don't think we list them under the XREF either. We do list the calibrations that it's using and some of the information, but we're really just sort of saying, okay, let's let the XREF handle those. You don't even have to see those necessarily. Okay, then a third thing we did, and I think this is probably the most critical here, is that we took a look at the way that XREFs were creating layers, and primarily back in the original CAD file. So on this proposed lighting layer, I've inserted this XREF, and the XREF is going to have all the same information that I had with the XREFs down below. And then we're going to say, now I'm going to have an XREF layer that I produced, okay, and on that layer I've got 16 objects, and I've got 13 of these lights. So this was on an object layer. I guess that's kind of like their design layer. What I'm primarily interested in are just the luminaires and the pole pendants. So I'm going to just turn those off real quick. And now I see that I've got these luminaires, but we got to looking at some of the blocks that we get, and we've seen this in other files as well. They've got block references within block references, and I have to tell you, Traverse PC just wasn't handling that real well. And as a result, we were putting everything on the single XREF layer. Well, now what happens with these is that these individual lines get put on their appropriate individual layers, which is how these blocks were set up in the CAD file as well. So what that means now is that I could turn off the luminaire layer, okay, and still have the poles in here because they're on a separate layer. And in fact, the poles are what I want to go stake out initially anyhow. So now I can convert to survey and say convert everything on that pole layer to a survey object, and now I can go stake out the poles. Prior to that, if it put everything on the same layer, I got just this mumbo jumbo kind of stuff. And I like this. It's just tracking better with what I had in the CAD file, and then it's actually giving me something that's more useful inside Traverse PC. And we've done that this summer. We've come back and just taken a look at kind of usability and what do I have to do to make this just a little more useful inside of Traverse PC for projects like this that are doing a little bit more than just boundary work or a little bit of stakeout work. And this is kind of a good example. And of course, now I've got whole nother lighting design that I'm going to bring in. And so I need to have XREFs reproduce exactly what I want them to reproduce here to make this useful, because I'm going to delete this XREF pretty soon as the city gets their building code stuff updated and approved. And I'm going to put in a different lighting plan for the 20-foot poles instead of the 16, just by inserting that drawing as an XREF. So I want this all to be real easy, real simple, and then that's when I'll go to actually convert those final poles to survey and stake those out. Right now I did convert these, and that's what I staked out on the ground. And that's why I said in the surfaces that, you can see this parking island extends all the way out into the parking area, and I've got those elevations staked. These light poles are over here on the perimeter, and I've got those elevations staked. So I thought, while I'm putting the light pole in, why not just make sure it's at elevation and stake it, and then I may not have to create any additional stakeout points. And in fact, the contractor looked at this and said, yeah, you've got plenty of points out here. I'll work off this existing pavement. I'll grade over to these light pole elevations off of these parking island elevations, and I should have everything I need. And he'll do just fine. The distances aren't that great. Okay, so let me look at my notes here and just make sure I've kind of covered the XREFs the way I wanted to. Yep, and I have. So let's go ahead and bring our outline back up, and let's go ahead and talk about calibrations. And you already saw me when I inserted this XREF. Let me just stop here just for a moment. Let me bring our outline back in here. And when I was talking about the XREFs and I inserted it calibrated. So let's just move right into calibrations here. And let's talk about kind of what's new inside of this version of Traverse PC with calibrations. And the biggie here is that we can calibrate incoming CAD files when we import the file. Prior to this, when we released calibrations at the beginning of the year, we had the ability to calibrate when I wrote a file. So if I had created a calibration that relates this incoming CAD file to my survey, if I needed to send a new CAD file back, I could just reverse that calibration. And we had that in the export of the CAD file. Well, we didn't have time to get the equivalent for importing in, but we have now, and I want to just show that to you real quickly. So I've inserted this XREF in this drawing, and I think that's primarily how we're going to deal with drawings a lot in the future. We're just going to bring them in as an XREF and let the XREF manage them entirely. But what if I had decided I wanted to bring this in as a drawing? Okay, so I've deleted that XREF. It's no longer in there. I don't have those lights in here. Let's go ahead and tell Traverse PC I want to go to Tools, Import Data into Drawing, and I'm going to import a CAD file, AutoCAD DWG. Notice there's a calibration field here, and it gives me the name, and I can also tell it none. Watch what happens as soon as I browse to this file, Luminaires. Traverse PC says, you've already created a calibration that has that file associated with it. And that's the file. Remember I said I used my pavement areas to calibrate the CAD file and that design with my original survey. And that's in this survey. The survey's aware of it. So it says, you know what? I've got this file associated. You want to go ahead and use it? And I can simply say yes. And Traverse PC now is going to bring that calibration in. And when I import this file, it's going to be calibrated when it imports it. And remember, my surveys at State Plane and this design that they did for me was basically at 0, 0. So I would have had to zoom extents find the design. It could be a little dot over here somewhere and a little dot for my survey. Have to find that and tell Traverse PC I want to calibrate it. Or I think I can actually calibrate the last import. Okay, I also could have calibrated the last import, but I have to know this is here and go through those steps. I think it's a lot more obvious just to say, hey, you know what, we're going to look for that calibration when we import, and if we find it, we're going to ask if you want to use it. Now, some of you are not aware of that calibration or how that works. I'm just going to go into this calibration and into the properties and reference files. So when I originally created this calibration, I created it for information that came in from a file, a CAD file. So Traverse PC knows that I can associate this CAD file with this calibration. And the whole reason for association is that as I transfer information from the drawing view to the CAD view with that file, or if I choose to import that CAD file in another drawing like I did here, or if I choose to write a new DWG file for this project and want to reverse calibrate, I can. So all of these options involving calibration kind of become automatic in Traverse PC. And that's why you saw this pop up and say, oh, we know about this drawing and it's associated with the calibration, do you want to use it? So Traverse PC imported the file, closed it, and then it said forward calibration succeeded using this calibrate polyline. So it even knows what direction. So calibrations have a direction. From the CAD file to my drawing is the forward direction. From the drawing back to that CAD file or another CAD file is the reverse direction. So Traverse PC is aware of forward and reverse when it calibrates, and it knows that I wanted to do this in the forward direction because it came from a CAD file originally. So I wanted you to kind of see how that works and what that looks like. And that's just going to streamline working with these CAD files that need to be calibrated in my survey. So we're going to use that a lot, whether we're bringing in XREFs or importing the drawings. I'm going to undo that last import, and I'm going to go ahead and insert the XREF again, because that's really what I wanted to do, and calibrate it because it knows it's associated. Okay, what I want to show you with the calibrations then is that in addition to making them seamless with the import, we also manage them better, I think, in the Drawing Data Manager. Okay, and I want to show you what I mean by that. So in the Drawing Data Manager now, I've got a Calibrations button down here, and it tells me that I have used this Calibrate Polyline calibration to calibrate some objects, entities. And the only one I've done so far is just that XREF. That XREF, which is going to be listed here, also knows that it was calibrated. So if I expand that XREF, it also knows that it was calibrated using that Calibrate Polyline calibration. So the great thing about that is that what if I picked the wrong one? I got a little confused when I did this. Okay, I can right-click that calibration and I can undo everything I calibrated with it. Maybe this wasn't the only XREF I brought in. I brought in 3 or 4 of them, I calibrated them, and then I say, oh, I used the wrong calibration. So I can go into everything that got calibrated by that calibration and uncalibrate it, or I can go into an individual object like this XREF, and I can also uncalibrate it. As soon as I uncalibrate it, of course, now it's down here at 0, 0, and my survey is up here at whatever the state plane coordinates are. Okay, and so I don't have anything to work with. Okay, let's say I did that. I brought it in and I either said no to the associated calibration, or I associated this DWG file with it yet, and I didn't know about that. I could say, okay, here's my XREF. It's listed under the XREFs here. I'm going to calibrate that. And I can tell Traverse PC, go ahead and look for a calibration file. So in this folder where I've got this, these lighting drawings, I've stored that calibration file. So I can go ahead and select that and use that to calibrate that XREF. And now Traverse PC brings it right into my survey where it's supposed to be based on its calibrated position. And I did that all from the Drawing Data Manager. And the reason I show you this is that if I hadn't done that here, I would have had to do that whole zoom extents, find it, calibrate it, do a zoom extents, reset the scale. It's just a lot of work to kind of go through all those pieces. It's a lot easier to come here and just say, yeah, I want to calibrate that. I want to use the calibration file. It actually was already selected there because it was the last one I used. And I can now know exactly where the light fixtures and poles are supposed to be. So again, we're focusing on usability. We've taken a look at things that used to require quite a number of steps and just said, you know, if we just look for an associated calibration when we insert an XREF, it can be a done deal on the insert. Or if I miss that somehow, I can come to the XREF in the Drawing Data Manager and calibrate it from here so I don't have to go zoom extents to find it. And all that just makes it a lot more useful. Or if I say, I used the wrong calibration for everything, then I can just uncalibrate it here, and that XREF along with anything else that I calibrated just got uncalibrated. And now I can start over. I can just insert those 4 XREFs that I need, choose the correct calibration, and everything's going to be just the way I want. So just wanted you to kind of see how that all works and why we think these tools are just so much nicer for making this kind of work, particularly with CAD files, XREFs, calibrations, a lot more usable inside of TPC Desktop 2019 Release 1. Let's drop down to dynamic offsets and using those with a circle circumference. Just kind of a little thing that people have asked for, and we took a look at and said, yeah, of course, we need to do that. We just hadn't had that in there before. And what it has to do with is I sometimes want to put a circle like this on something like a vicinity map. And I just want to snap from the center of the circle to any point on the perimeter, generally orthogonally. Horizontally is what we do. And I want to display that distance or come back and modify that label to display the distance that I want. Okay, particularly when a vicinity map is to scale, I might want to show that, you know, here's a circle that encompasses a 60-foot circumference, and I show that by showing a 30-foot radius on it. And radius to any point in the circumference is the easiest way for me to know that I've got the right distance. A little harder for me to pick a tangent circumference all the way across to another tangent circumference and make sure I've got the diameter. So radius is the easy. And then of course, as long as we're doing this, I can also pick an outside point and say I want to go to the nearest point on the circle, or to a point tangent on the circle, or to the center of the circle, however that works. And we just didn't used to allow these outside snaps. So let's take a look at kind of what we mean by that and how that works. I'm going to bring up a sample file that has one of these circles in the vicinity map. And sometimes all we do is just kind of circle the area. But what if I wanted to show kind of a distance on this so that they knew what the scale was of this or what size of this area was we were looking at? Okay, so I'm going to be able to tell Traverse PC then that I want to be able to put in a dynamic offset. So I'm going to, and I tend to pull down the first button in this toolbar that has stack tools and select it here, but I also could go to draw a dynamic offset, right? I just tend to use these buttons for the most part. It's kind of how I do things. And I'm going to come down and tell Traverse PC that I want to choose the insert of this circle here. Okay. Now I think it'll let me choose that. Yeah, okay. And then I want to go to the nearest point on that circle, and I can tell it, you know, orthogonally, or I can just kind of guess here. Orthogonally, I can hold down the control key, right? Or I can just click here. And now I have that distance as a dynamic offset. And of course, I'm going to want to make some changes here, right? I'm going to want to go into my drawing settings. I'm going to want to say, I want all my dynamic offsets not to be that gray like that, because it's not going to show up. I want them to be black. Okay, and I want to use a nice arrowhead, but fairly small for that. I want the line to be solid, and I want to use an Arial font. That's kind of what I gravitate to for everything like this, and I want it to be a certain size. So let's go ahead and apply that, make sure it's what we want. I'm also clearing the background in case there's an image there. Okay, and I want the arrows, I guess I didn't want them quite that small, I want them a little bit larger. Okay, so now that takes care of that, and then I can come in and modify the label. So I can just double click the label, and because I'm at a different scale than the drawing, I can actually put in what I want. So this is 500 feet for the radius. Okay, so now I've got what I want just by simply using a dynamic offset tool that I didn't used to be able to snap to the circumference of the circle on. So I can save this drawing. When I bring it back up, I'll have that 500-foot arrow there. So you can find lots of reasons for using this. Right away, one of our beta testers who does septic designs was using this to show distances from existing drain fields. And I thought, oh, okay, that's kind of neat. Or existing manholes, things that they had drawn as circles originally, and they just are snapping to the outside. So they weren't doing this inside from the center. They were hitting things from an existing point outside of the circle. But right away they found it useful, and we just had a number of people ask for something like that. And that's generally how these get put in. Just enough people say, you'd make my life a lot easier if I could just whatever. And this is an example of that. So new snap tools for dynamic offsets related to circles. The last topic I want to touch on today real quick is a couple little changes to the GIS. And when I say this, primarily it's the Esri shapefile interface. Let's just bring that product page over here. We've got a couple of changes we made to exporting the geodetic extents when we exported GIS, and we didn't have the undo redo available for importing polylines. So if we just take a look at that real quick, if I go to File, Export, and I tell Traverse PC I want to export just the tag traverses as a Esri shapefile, I've got the option in here about how I want to send that out. And if I send that out as geographic latitude and longitude, Traverse PC now properly sends the extents of each parcel as latitude and longitude. So a little thing it did that just works better. And then if I go to Import, File, Import, and I choose to bring in Esri shapefiles as polylines, or if I bring in polylines, I'll then be able to undo and redo that. And for whatever reason, prior to this, that undo redo simply didn't work. If I was bringing in points, that's just fine. And if I was bringing the GIS shapes into a drawing, I could undo that as well. It just was this import polylines into the survey that undo redo didn't work. Okay, now the primary thing that we listed over here in the 2019 R1, this whole thing about traverse names, point labels, and descriptions. And I can show it to you real quick. And Traverse PC has always written out, when I send points out to GIS, it writes the point label, the description, the coordinates, or the geodetic position, depending on what you're exporting, so that they've got some information there that relates you back to your survey. Okay, and the same way with traverses. When we write a survey out as polylines, each traverse gets written out with the traverse name, description, basic information about the traverse. Okay. The problem was that Traverse PC didn't try to read that information when we brought it back in. And you're not likely to bring one of your own files back in, but what if someone just added some information to one of your files and sent it back to you? Maybe it'd be nice to know that these are the same points or the same traverses kind of thing. And I'll just show you kind of what that looks like. So I'm going to export the 17 tag traverses as a shapefile, and I'm going to send them out as polylines. and I'm going to do geographic. Okay, and let's go ahead and give that some kind of a name, just so it's real easy. Export polylines from TPC. Okay, let's go ahead and do that export. Selected traverses. So now let's tell Traverse PC we want to import. We're not going to save that. And let's import shapes. So this is just an empty file we created. Let's go ahead and import one of those back in. And we're running a little short of time here, so I'll tell Traverse PC that, okay, I just want to bring in the Traverse one. Let's browse, bring in the export polylines from Traverse PC. Let's import that. So just a warning, Traverse PC says, you know, if you've got a lot of polylines, maybe you want to open that in the drawing view. So it knows that there are 76 of them, and we know that we want to create traverses for these. So we'll just say okay. So it brings those all in, and look what we end up with. So all of these traverses now use the original traverse names that we exported from Traverse PC. Otherwise, it would have said polyline 1, polyline 2, polyline 3, like that, because it didn't have that information available. But now that we've got that information available, we just said, let's go ahead and just use that when we bring these back in. And again, it's just kind of a usability thing. And then I could simply come in and, you know, I can select all of them, but just by clicking the group that they're in, and then I click one of them, and I can change the way I want it to draw any one of them just by going into the drawing settings of one of the selected, and it'll apply that to all of them. So I could quickly get these all to draw just the way I want. But at least now you get to see that we've brought all those poly lines back in as traverses, and we've given them the name that they originally had in Traverse PC, because we've always stored that with the shape files that we write, and now we can just import them back in.